Unexpected drama. That's the only way to describe what happened on PNG Center Court in Cincinnati. Fans are still talking about it days later, because this match didn't just have a winner and a loser. It had a 13-deuce marathon, a stunning collapse, and a finish so late into the night that half the fan base watching from the Philippines was still awake for it. This is the story of the match nobody could look away from.
Before we get to the drama itself, you have to understand exactly what was riding on this match, because the tension wasn't manufactured. It was built match by match, all season long. Alex Eala walked into the Cincinnati Open carrying a 5-match winning streak against top 10 opponents, a run that had already reshaped how the tennis world talked about her. She'd stunned Alina Rybakina and Alina Svitolina in Berlin. She'd dethroned Iga Swiatek at Wimbledon. She'd beaten Svitolina again and upset Jessica Pegula on her way to capturing her first ever WTA Tour title in Washington. At just 21 years old, she wasn't the underdog storyline anymore. She was the player everyone circled on the draw sheet, the one opponents genuinely feared facing. Waiting across the net in the round of 32 was Amanda Anisimova, a former world number 3 whose 2026 season looked nothing like her breakout 2025 campaign when she reached the finals of both Wimbledon and the US Open. Coming into this match, Anisimova had lost 5 straight matches against top 20 opponents. She was 1-6 against that caliber of competition all year. On paper, this matchup had one obvious favorite, and it wasn't close. That's exactly why what happened next caught fans so off guard. This wasn't supposed to be dramatic. It was supposed to be a formality, another name added to Ala's growing list of top 10 scalps, another headline confirming what everyone already suspected about her ceiling. 17th seed against 9th seed. Rising star against a former elite player trying to remember what that level felt like. But tennis has a habit of refusing to follow the script that reputation writes for it, and on this particular night, deep into the second week of the North American hardcourt swing at the Limner Family Tennis Center in Mason, Ohio, both players were about to be part of a match that would end up generating more conversation than almost anything else in the tournament. Not because of controversy off the court, but because of exactly how unpredictable the tennis itself turned out to be. Because here's what fans didn't expect walking in. They didn't expect a single game to last over 20 minutes. They didn't expect a 2-game lead in the deciding set to evaporate without a fight. And they certainly didn't expect the match to still be going, tension climbing with every point, as the clock crept toward 1 a.m. on the East Coast. This was supposed to be routine. Instead, it became the match everyone was still talking about days later. The drama didn't wait long to arrive. It showed up in the 5th game of the very first set. Eala and Anisimova had traded holds early, both finding their rhythm, both testing the other's patience from the baseline. Then came the game that fans would be replaying online for days afterward. 13 deuces, back and forth, neither player willing to give an inch, stretching what should have been a routine hold into a 20-minute standoff. 20 minutes, one single game. If you want to understand why this match immediately felt different from anything else on the schedule that day, that marathon game is where it started. Eala came out the other side of it. 2 uncharacteristic errors from Anisimova handed her the break and a 3-2 lead, and she rode that momentum to close out the opening set 6-4. For a moment, it looked like the drama had peaked early, a wild opening set followed by business as usual. It wasn't business as usual, not even close. The second set stayed tight and controlled until the 7th game, when Anisimova finally broke through. She held her next 2 service games without wasting the opportunity, leveling the match at 1 set apiece with a 6-4 set win of her own. And just like that, a match that had briefly felt settled was suddenly wide open again. In the deciding 3rd set, Eala responded exactly the way her 5-match win streak suggested she would. She broke early and surged out to a 2-0 lead, 2 games away from continuing her run, 2 games away from another headline win over a ranked opponent. If you were watching live, this was the moment everyone assumed the story was about to resolve itself the expected way. Instead, this is where the real unexpected drama began. From 2-0 down, Anisimova simply refused to lose another game. She won 6 straight to close out the burn set 6-2 and complete one of the most dramatic reversals of the entire tournament. Think about the scale of what just happened. A player who had survived a 13-deuce marathon, closed a tense opening set, and built a 2-game cushion in the decider, watched the entire match unravel without a single response. The final score read 4-6, 6-4, 6-2, taking 2 hours and 28 minutes to complete. But the raw numbers don't capture what made this match so unforgettable. It was the whiplash, the way control shifted, vanished, and shifted again, right up until it flipped completely upside down in the space of a handful of games, live, in front of a crowd that had shown up expecting something far less chaotic.
Once the match ended, near 1 in the morning Eastern Time, the reaction didn't slow down, it accelerated. Fans who had stayed up deep into the night, especially those tuning in from the Philippines in the early morning hours, flooded social media within minutes. The Cincinnati Open's own account captured the chaos in real time, posting about Eala's marathon survival in that 5th game with visible disbelief, and later marking Anisimova's dramatic turnaround with equal astonishment. The tone across timelines wasn't anger or controversy in the traditional sense, it was pure shock. Nobody had expected a match this lopsided on paper to turn into one of the most talked about contests of the entire tournament. What made the conversation even louder was the timing of the collapse itself. A 2-1 lead in a deciding set isn't just a small advantage, it's the kind of lead that statistically players convert far more often than they lose. Watching Eala fail to win another game from that position wasn't just surprising, it was the exact kind of moment that gets replayed, dissected, and debated across group chats and comment sections for days. And then there was Anisimova's side of the story, which added an entirely different layer to why fans couldn't stop discussing this match. This wasn't simply a case of an in-form player continuing her momentum. Anisimova arrived having lost 5 straight matches against top 20 competition, having managed just 1 win over that caliber of player in all of 2026. For a player with her pedigree, a 2-time Grand Slam finalist just 1 year earlier, that kind of drought was its own quiet storyline. So when she suddenly discovered 6 straight games of composed, aggressive tennis at the exact moment she needed it most, it wasn't just a result. It was a genuine redemption arc playing out in real time, and fans picked up on that immediately. In her post-match interview, Anisimova gave voice to exactly what had shifted. "I'm really happy with the way I was able to find my game in the middle of the match," she said. "Alex is a really tough player, so I knew it was going to be a tough challenge for me. So just really happy with the way I was able to find my tennis and play aggressive and turn it around." That phrase, finding her tennis, spread quickly among fans discussing the match, because it captured something relatable. This wasn't a player gloating about a win. It was a player being honest about how uncertain she'd felt heading in, and how dramatic it was to rediscover her level under real pressure. Combine that honesty with the sheer unpredictability of the scoreline, and you had every ingredient needed for a match that fans simply couldn't stop talking about.
But the conversation wasn't only about Anisimova's redemption. For Eala's supporters, this loss carried real weight, and the online reaction reflected genuine heartbreak layered underneath the shock. This wasn't a case of Eala being outplayed from start to finish. She'd taken the first set, she'd led in the decider. By almost every measure, she'd been the better player for large stretches of a genuinely brutal 2.5-hour battle. That made the ending harder to process, not easier. Fans who had watched her build a 5-match winning streak against elite competition, a run that included wins over Swiatek, Rybakina, Svitolina twice, and Pegula, now had to reckon with the fact that the streak had a limit after all. The way the loss unfolded fueled hours of debate. Was this simply fatigue catching up with a young player who had been carrying an enormous workload all summer? Was it a mental lapse at the worst possible moment, the kind of nerve check every rising star eventually fails at least once? Or was it simply Anisimova playing a level of tennis nobody, including Eala, could have anticipated from someone who'd struggled against ranked opponents for months? Fans weren't short on theories, and none of them agreed completely, which is exactly why the conversation kept going long after the final point was played. What's striking looking back at the match is that neither player did anything to invite controversy in the traditional sense. There was no on-court incident, no heated exchange, no dramatic gesture that needed defending or explaining. The drama was entirely earned through the tennis itself, through a match that kept refusing to settle into a predictable rhythm. And in some ways, that made it even more compelling to fans. There was nothing to argue about except the tennis, and the tennis alone was enough to keep timelines buzzing for days. Adding to the intensity was the stage this result set up next. Anisimova's win didn't just end Eala's night, it sent her straight into a round of 16 clash against Wimbledon champion Linda Noskova, with barely any rest after a match that finished near 1 in the morning. That immediate follow-up test became its own talking point, with fans debating whether Anisimova could possibly find that same level again on almost no recovery time, against an opponent riding the confidence of a Grand Slam title. So the drama didn't fully resolve when the match ended. It simply shifted forward into a new question fans were suddenly asking about what Anisimova could do for an encore.
Strip away the shock value, and what remains is a genuinely compelling story about the margins that separate one outcome from a completely different one. Eala's 2026 record against top 10 opponents now sits at 7-3, still an exceptional number for a 21-year-old competing against the best players in the world. That number alone tells you this loss wasn't a reflection of her ceiling. It was a single result, on a single night, against a player who happened to find her best tennis at the worst possible moment for Eala's streak. 7 of her 9 career wins over top 10 players came this season alone. That kind of consistency doesn't disappear because of one collapse in a deciding set.
For Anisimova, the story runs in the opposite direction, and it's just as meaningful. This win marked only her second victory over a top 20 opponent in all of 2026. Given a season defined largely by inconsistency and a 5-match losing skid against that caliber of competition, this result carries weight that goes well beyond a single scoreline. She's now reached the round of 16 at a WTA 1000 event for the 5th time this season, and the 17th time in her career, proof that even during a difficult stretch, her floor as a competitor never really dropped. What she'd been missing was a signature win against someone this dangerous, and Cincinnati finally gave her one. That's really what made this match so unpredictable, and why fans latched onto it the way they did. It wasn't a case of a favorite cruising past an overmatched opponent, and it wasn't a case of a massive upset either. It was two players, each fighting a different kind of battle, one trying to extend a historic streak, one trying to rediscover a level she feared she'd lost, colliding at exactly the moment both battles reached their most intense point. And that 13-deuce game in the very first set now reads almost like foreshadowing. A 20-minute standoff neither player was willing to lose, setting the tone for a match that would refuse to resolve itself easily all the way to its final point. Nothing about this contest was simple. Nothing about it followed the script the rankings suggested it should. Maybe that's exactly why it's still generating conversation. Because at the highest level of tennis, the matches fans remember longest aren't always the ones with the biggest names or the highest stakes. Sometimes they're just the ones that refuse to go the way everyone expected. The ones where the drama comes purely from two competitors refusing to back down until the very last point is decided.
So where does this leave both players? And why does this particular match still has fans talking days later? For Amanda Anisimova, this result might end up being remembered as the turning point of an otherwise difficult season. She's now reached the round of 16 at every North American WTA 1000 event this year, a distinction shared only with Jessica Pegula and Elena Rybakina. But statistics alone don't explain why this specific win resonated the way it did. It was the manner of it, coming back from a losing skid against elite competition, finding her level under real pressure, and being honest afterward about exactly how uncertain she'd felt heading in. That combination of vulnerability and redemption is exactly the kind of story fans hold on to. For Eala, this loss doesn't erase what's already been an extraordinary season. Wins over Swiatek, Rybakina, Svitolina, and Pegula, plus her first WTA Tour title in Washington, aren't diminished by one collapse in a deciding set. If anything, this match adds a new layer to her story, proof that even the most dominant streaks eventually meet a night where the other player simply refuses to fold, and a reminder that how she responds next may matter more than the loss itself. But maybe the real reason this match keeps coming up in conversation isn't about either player individually, it's about what it represented. A reminder that even when the numbers and the rankings suggest a predictable outcome, tennis rarely cooperates with expectations. A 13-deuce Maragon game, a blown 2-0 lead in the decider, a finish near 1 in the morning that had fans across time zones refreshing their feeds in real time. That's not manufactured drama. That's just what happens when two competitors refuse to make anything easy. So here's the question worth sitting with. Was this simply one wild, unpredictable night in a long season, or a genuine signal that the margins at the top of women's tennis are thinner than anyone assumed? For Eala, was this the exception to an otherwise unstoppable run? And for Anisimova, was this the spark that turns her season around for good? That's really what makes this match worth talking about, long after the final point was played. What did you think was the real turning point? That marathon 5th game, or the moment Eala's 2-0 lead in the decider disappeared? Let us know in the comments. And if you want more real, in-depth breakdowns of the biggest moments in women's tennis as they happen, make sure you're subscribed, because with storylines like this one, you won't want to miss what comes next.